You give them the arguments that they need to hear because they trust you, right? And you say, hey, did you do early voting? Have you turned in your ballot yet? You be persistent, and you make that difference just 3 people at a time. So even if you are still hesitating and you're not sure, I want you to make sure to sign down and at least do a pledge card so you can talk to your 3 people and we can get the most possible votes against the genocide. So there have been many powerful speakers here this afternoon. But leading up, I think, to a very important speaker who it's my honor to introduce. Jill Stein has been fighting against war, has been fighting against the undemocratic Democratic Party for a very long time. I mentioned earlier, she's on the ballot in 47 states in this country. And in some of those, yes, exactly. And that's no small task. That's the work of volunteers and supporters, but it is also fighting ruthlessly, unfortunately, against the so-called Democratic Party, who has fought to voter suppress ordinary working class people and Arab Americans who would like to vote for Jill Stein. Instead, the Democratic Party has fought to keep her name off the ballot in states like Nevada. It's shameful. But we are out organizing and fighting to let people know, to fight back against the corporate media, to cut across the media blackout, and to let people know that there is an anti-genocide candidate on the ballot that they can support. And it is my pleasure to introduce anti-war candidate, pro-worker candidate, Green Party candidate for president, Dr. Jill Stein.
Palestine! Palestine will free us. We refuse to vote for Palestine. Well, let me fix that. We refuse to vote for genocide in Palestine. We refuse. We refuse to be talked into selling our souls, into compromising, into being talked, into affirming, endorsing, and enabling genocide. And when we are asked to please, won't we be quiet? Won't we just shut up and sit down? Won't we just be good little boys and girls? Because truly the Democratic Party owns our votes. They own Muslim votes, they own Black votes, they own youth votes, they own so-called liberal votes. But they don't. They have to earn our votes. Any politician who tells you that they own your vote does not deserve consideration of your vote. The Democrats are running scared, and they should be scared. They could fix this if they wanted. They could win back the Muslim vote, but they would rather lose the election. They would rather lose the election than stop the genocide. This is on them. They want to blame Muslims. They want to blame Greens. They want to blame socialists. They want to blame anybody, but just take the focus off of their genocide. Democrats have been losing votes profoundly. When was the big tipping point? It was actually in 2010 in the midterm elections, when they lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures across the country. They lost 64 seats in Congress. They lost 13 seats in the Senate. They lost 13 governorships. Where was the third party to blame that on? There was none. This was the after effect, basically, of the Democrats throwing working people under the bus in the bailouts for Wall Street and the big banks and the mortgage brokers in 2008. They bailed out Wall Street and they threw out the homeowners. Instead of bailing out students and families who badly need a bailout, needed it then and need it now, very much against expressed public opinion, the two Democratic houses of Congress and the Obama Democratic White House, a trifecta of Democrats, decided to bail out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars and allow millions of homeowners basically to be thrown out and lose their life savings. So the Democrats were punished. They didn't have any third party to blame it on. There was no spoiler mythology in 2010. They just said they got shellacked and they didn't explain why. And since then, that loss has continued as the Democrats continue to lose votes because they have abandoned working people. And even going back before the Wall Street bailouts, you had Bill Clinton and NAFTA and the loss of millions and millions of workers' jobs. So the Democrats have been throwing working people under the bus for decades, actually. They have no one to blame but themselves. This is why they cannot discuss the issues, because they are not standing up for their traditional base. As Joe Biden said in the 2020 race, he said that nothing will change. He reassured the Wall Street donors that nothing will change. And indeed, what changed? Well, the billionaires got even richer. They doubled and even tripled their wealth during COVID, while ordinary working people were pushed further and further into poverty. Child poverty rates have tripled, in fact, in the last 3 years. That data just came out. Over 60% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Some 87 million Americans do not have adequate health insurance. Some 18 million could not afford their pharmaceuticals. Some 8 million were pushed into poverty just trying to afford their health care alone. You have young people. According to polls now, 50% are saying they are hopeless about the future. And a quarter of young people are saying that they, in fact, have considered harming themselves in just the last 2 weeks before that poll. So this is not a world that is working for working people in this country. And that goes hand in hand with the endless war machine, which is conducting war and genocide, specifically in the Middle East, but wars all over the world. And in fact, we have seen a whole series of catastrophic wars since 9/11 that have cost US taxpayers some $20 trillion, according to Brown University Cost of War Project. In the last year alone, these are numbers crunched by Jeffrey Sachs at the Columbia University Economics Department, that we have spent, the average American household has spent in the last year some $12,000 alone on the endless war machine. It's 50% and more of our congressional budget. This is costing us big time at home. It's impoverishing us at home. This is why they tell us we don't have the money for the victims of Hurricane Helene. This is why people are isolated. This is why people do not have the food and the water and the electricity that they need in the wake of the third worst hurricane on record in American history. This is why we are not fixing that problem at its source. We need to start phasing out fossil fuels. It's great to create renewables, but we need to end fossil fuels. And in fact, we need public ownership and public management and public accountability for the fossil fuel industry, for the banking industry. We need public banks. We need public management and ownership, likewise, of transportation. There's no way that we will have a national rail system unless we are actually coordinating that on a public basis. We also need public housing with public ownership of this critical resource. Back in the Clinton administration, they passed the so-called Fair Cloth Amendment. There was nothing fair about it. It basically prohibited any further expenditures on public housing, which is absolutely critical if we are truly going to meet the urgent and dire needs of housing in this country. Some 50% of Americans now who rent their housing are severely economically stressed, paying 30 to 50% and more of their income just to keep a roof over their heads, which doesn't leave much to pay your student loans or your car insurance or your healthcare costs and so on. We have a housing emergency in this country right now, and we can solve that right now, by the way. We can solve that by creating rent control at the federal level across the whole country, to stop the gentrification, to stop the continuing displacement. We need a tenant bill of rights so that renters are not arbitrarily evicted so that their landlords can just raise the rent and gentrify the communities. In Europe, many countries are building what's now called social housing, which is mixed income, it's permanent, it's housing that's in the public domain. We need a counterweight to the private housing industry, which is driven by luxury housing and big profits for big developers. We need public housing that will meet our needs. And that housing also needs to be environmentally sound and based on renewable energy. This is why, as part of our Green New Deal, we also call for environmentally sound housing and the building of 15 million new units of affordable housing through the public housing and social housing. And by the way, on day one, we will declare a climate emergency on day one, because we have a climate emergency. If Hurricane Helene did not make that point for you, then just look at the Colorado River, which is very close to shutting down. And the Colorado River supplies the water for California agriculture, which supplies half of the fruits and vegetables for the entire nation. So you think you've seen food inflation? Well, just wait until the Colorado River shuts down, which could be in the next 1 to 2 years. The Washington Post ran a headline last year calling it the doomsday scenario on the Colorado River. And we don't hear about this much from the corporate press, which is why another thing that we will do on day one, if we are so lucky, as to turn the White House into a greenhouse and make the world a better place. We will also, on day one, undertake an antitrust lawsuit against the corporatized, consolidated media, so that the media is no longer dominated by the apologists for power. We need watchdog media, not lapdog media. It's hard to come by in this day and age. But thanks, of course, to all those who are here today to cover this event. Thank you to the press for being the exception to the rule by covering what's going on here. And let me again just say why this is so important, and give a big thank you, especially to Abandon Biden, to Workers Strike Back, and to Dearborn, and to everyone who is here today. We are ground zero. We are the moral compass that is saying no to genocide, that is saying no to endless empire and its endless war machine. We are saying no to oligarchy. We are saying no to rising fascism, which is a serious problem, not just waiting for Donald Trump. It's happening right now here under Democrats, with cop cities, with the war on freedom of the press, the war on freedom of speech, the war on the freedom to protest. Top cities are happening under many democratic municipal administrations across the country. We're seeing some 70 to 80 cop cities being built. We're seeing the training of local police now by the Israeli Defense Forces, teaching these abusive tactics for those who've been subjected to them. It's absolutely outrageous, criminal, and dehumanizing. We need to put an end to it. Let me also say another action item on day one is to instruct the Department of Justice, our Green Department of Justice, to take AIPAC to court as a violation for those who are not convinced. I highly recommend that you see the recent investigative reporting that was done by Li Fang, formerly of The Intercept, now independent. His investigation of nonprofit organizations in this country who are actually funded by the Knesset, by money coming directly from Israel to nonprofit organizations in this country in order to change legislation, in order to change rules on campuses. Why is it that we suddenly have this ocean of repression on campuses or an ocean of anti-BDS legislation around the country? This is not coming from nowhere. This is funded. This is action on behalf of a foreign government, and the money is actually coming from the foreign government. Not necessarily all of it, but lots of it. So I recommend anybody who has questions about what's going on here to go to the source. The main thing I want to say here, I want to quote first Frederick Douglass, who said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We are that demand. Don't listen to anyone who tells you to sit down and shut up and just take marching orders. And further, in the words of Alice Walker, and I paraphrase her a little bit, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have it, and what you see happening here today is part of that. This is exactly what the Democrats fought so hard to keep us off the ballot. This is why they were publicly advertising, shamefully publicly advertising for infiltrators and disruptors and spies. They were publicly advertising they did job postings for people to manage infiltrators and spies on our campaign. They also hijacked our public funding and held on to it for months while we were conducting our ballot drives. And they caused some trouble on that front. But this is why they are running scared. They are running scared because they know that their days are numbered. Their days of genocide are numbered because 68% of Americans, according to a poll done even back in November, already oppose the genocide and demand an immediate ceasefire. And since then, 61% of Americans demand an immediate weapons embargo. And we must have that. And I strongly echo the remarks made earlier today that the longshoremen really need to be urged by us to stand up and to be the source. You know, it is working people. It is working people organized at the workplace, in their unions, that bring our moral vision, our moral compass to the political and economic reality. And boycott, divestment, and sanctions has been enormously effective. Israel is in deep trouble on many fronts, both militarily and economically. And some of that is because of the contracts that are being canceled, most recently at MIT. MIT, the home of so much of the military industrial complex, canceled a major contract. And this is undoubtedly why so many heads are being bashed in campuses around the country, because so many campuses are being funded by military contracts, which again gets to why we are here. We are here to create an America and a world that works for all of us. Step one is to stop the genocide. And every vote that is cast for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or RFK, because he's still on the ballot in some states, many states actually, every vote is an endorsement of genocide. Every vote for our campaign is a shot across the bow of the empire, telling them that we are here, we are organized, we are not going away, this genocide will be ended. And again, on day one of our administration, in fact, even before day one, on the day of the election, we would pick up the phone and tell Bibi Netanyahu that his genocidal war is over. And that would not only end the genocide in Gaza, that would end the war that is expanding right now into the West Bank, into Lebanon, into Yemen, into Syria, into Iran. This is unbelievably dangerous for all of us. And all of this goes away the minute the genocide is over. It's not like it's rocket science. It's not like Biden and Harris don't have the power to end it. They claim to be working diligently night and day for a ceasefire, but actually we know from the revelations published in Politico the other day that what they're working for is the expanding war. They have been working to encourage Israel to move forward and attack Lebanon. So they are not doing what they say, but they do have the power. We must hold them to account because it's simple. It is a simple matter, as Amr was saying earlier in the program. It's not complicated. It's simple. We have the moral imperative to end this genocide. We have the popular support, and we have the means to end this genocide by picking up the phone and telling Bibi Netanyahu it's over, just as Ronald Reagan did in 1980. And it doesn't end there, which is why our movement does not end. Our movement does not end on election day. And whatever we do, it is a victory. It is a victory whether we are 2% or 5% or 15% or 26%, which can win a four-way race. Remember, in the last presidential election, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters voted with their feet by declining to vote for the parties of war and Wall Street being rammed down our throats, back then and now as well. So 1 out of 3 voters is enough to win a 3-way and a 4-way race. So I would not accept as written in stone that we are not going to the White House. I wouldn't accept anything in this election that has defied all expectations. We aim as high as we deserve to go. And we work for that. Because winning a grassroots campaign is not rocket science. As Shama was saying earlier, it is about flyering, it is about tabling, it is about phone banking, it is about holding events. This can be done. This is not rocket science. I urge you to sign up, to volunteer, both with Workers Strike Back, and we're also organizing through our campaign at jillstein2024.com, and we will provide the materials and the support for us to be the foot soldiers of transformation. Because it is time for transformation. We are in the position right now of deciding not only what kind of future we will have, but whether we will have a future or not. What is being normalized right now in Gaza is the torture, the daily torture and murder of children on an industrial scale. As a Jew who grew up after the genocide of Jews, shortly after the Second World War, our community was asking itself, is there life after genocide? And we discovered, in our community at least, that there is life after genocide only if we affirm that genocide will never happen again, not to anyone. And we held accountable. We held accountable for that genocide, that Holocaust. Not just the perpetrators, but the bystanders. And this is happening with our tax dollars, our elected warmongers in the White House and in Congress. And on that basis, it is a moral imperative for us to stand up and do all that we can to throw the bugs out now, all of the genociders, and to not vote for genocide, to make a strong vote against genocide, and for us to continue building this movement. Because when workers are getting together with Muslims, with campuses, with students, with Jews at Jewish Voice for Peace, that I will also give a shout out to, this is an unstoppable coalition. We are strong together, we are unstoppable together. Let's make it happen. Thank you all so much for being here. This is the beginning of a stronger coalition than we have ever seen in our time. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Free Palestine, free us all. Thank you.
My dear brothers and sisters, before we leave, we are excited to announce that Wednesday, October the 9th, at 12 p.m. noon, we'll be holding a press conference at the Henry Ford Centennial Library to deliver an important message that affects our entire community. This announcement marks a pivotal moment for our cause, and we encourage all of you to join us there in hearing what promises to be a crucial and impactful update. Stay tuned for more details and mark your calendars for the significant event Wednesday at noon. The details can be found on our website, abandonyourrace.com. And while you are there, please pledge to donate from now till November, at least $10, $20, $40, $50, whatever you can.